Welcome to Practicing Life podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Pitzer. I want to talk to you about brain fog. I'm sure at one point or another you have experienced this. In some ways, this is a natural part of our lives. But for some people, this is a chronic condition and one that can be frustrating and one that can really impact your life. So let's dig into it. So, when you look at the National Library of Medicine, they talk about brain fog being about slow thinking, difficulty focusing, confusion, lack of concentration, forgetfulness, and overall, it's contributed to a way of thinking of your brain as mental fatigue. So, again, this is something that's going to happen. You have a poor night's rest. You're going to notice that you think slower and you have a difficult time concentrating. But one of the reasons that I am bringing all of this up to you right now isn't because this is just a natural part of life. It is because I was talking with another person. And in my line of coaching and helping others to really connect with themselves, this is one of the things that I see. I see this happening in my own personal life. For me personally, I have experienced this after traumatic events in my life with my daughter when she was born, and we learned that she was kind of special needs and she stopped being able to move, or another period of time when she had a seizure and stopped breathing. These were times in my life where there was a significant amount of stress that overloaded my system in such a way that it impacted the gray matter of my brain, which resulted in this type of brain fog. But I also see this a lot when someone is in a relationship with an unhealthy type of partner. So, whether that is like a mentally, emotionally, physically, financially abusive relationship. I see this as well when I do coaching for people on really small issues, like maybe they're not getting along with a coworker or a boss, and there's a certain amount of resistance and frustration. And, when you really dig into it, you can see that the conflict at certain points can get to a point where the person that I'm helping experiences brain fog. So, again, you're familiar with this. You've probably had memory problems. You've probably had those days for all of those new parents out there that had just had a newborn and have had lack of sleep. Like you find yourself putting the milk in the microwave or, randomly in your pantry with your dry foods. Like you have this lack of attention, lack of focus. You're not processing clearly. You just don't have that mental focus. And so, from a neurological standpoint, this can be caused if you have this like on a daily basis, if this is a chronic issue in your life, there can be several reasons for this. And I am not coming to you as a doctor. I am not coming to you as a therapist. I am coming to you, as a person who has experienced this herself, and also as a coach, someone who is helping people to really anchor into their body, into themselves, and to really have the best life possible by letting go of some things that no longer serve them. All right. So that's what I do as like a neurolinguist practitioner. And so when you have these kind of chronic conditions, from a neuroscience perspective, this can be caused by all sorts of things. This can be like if you are a cancer patient and you are going through chemotherapy, this can be a side effect of chemotherapy. If you have neurological conditions, like if you've ever experienced a stroke, that is where the cells in your brain die in certain functions in certain areas, and therefore you can have that memory loss, that brain fog, such as dementia. You can be born with certain types of conditions, like my daughter, has a very rare genetic diagnosis. Her hippocampus is biolaterally rotated. And so she doesn't store or learn correctly because the hippocampus is part of your brain that is responsible for learning and kind of categorizing what you're learning, putting it into generalization buckets. Like that doesn't work for her. So, but you can also have brain fog from a neurological standpoint because of stress induced burnout. So, for all of my perfectionists out there, for all of my empaths, people that have found themselves to be sensitive, you have most likely experienced burnout. I'm going to probably say you have. There's like it's almost impossible not to experience burnout if you are a perfectionist. Okay, so there can be a lot of reasons for it. So we understand what it is, like what it's doing to the brain. You understand different causes for it. And then I'm going to just really just quickly hit on the solution, right? The solution according to all of those experts out there who study the brain and, different matters, right? This is what they pretty much say. Mindful practices, go do yoga, set in meditation, exercise regularly, go out on the 20-minute walk every single day, get fresh air, get that vitamin D for your skin, face the sun when you wake up in the morning, take a deep breath, drink lots of water, right? Get a good night's rest. I'm going to tell you the truth. I function my best when I get 8.5 hours of sleep. How likely is it to get 8.5 hours sleep when you have a special needs daughter that you have to care for, blah, 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 right? I can, but it means that I'm going to have to do things differently. And I also need help. Luckily, I have a wonderful husband. This doesn't always happen, but I at least get to sleep in on Saturdays. All right. So these solutions, though, aren't always practical. Like I was just mentioning, there are situations in my life where it would require a certain amount of planning and steps in order to be able to get the sleep that I need. And for other people, they're going to experience different things. Like I totally have the mindful practice. I have the regular exercise. I have the great diet. I'm drinking enough water. I usually get 7+ hours of sleep, which is more than like 90% of the population who more along the lines gets of 6+ hours of sleep. Not only that, but as the older you get and the hormones coming in, your sleep is affected by that. So, but what this doesn't really help you with, though, is like those traumatic experiences that have that long lasting effect on your brain. So, you can do all of these great solutions. You can practice your mindfulness, you can get regular exercise, you can have that diet, you can have that sleep. I'm going to tell you from my own personal experiences, I had every single one of those solutions. The doctors, well, I don't know, I want to say prescribe, but then I'm like, there's anti-words that you're allowed to say. But that doctors tell you to do, I was doing exactly what they tell you to do, but I was still extremely experiencing brain fog. But it also had to be because I was in a relationship that was not healthy. And so this is what I see a lot of. And I see people's frustrations when they're on social media and they're talking about these type of things. Now, I do not help people decide whether or not they should stay or they should go. I do not concentrate on your relationship with somebody that is unhealthy. I concentrate on you because at the end of the day, I can help one person understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and potentially reconnect with their body. And this is what this particular brain fog episode is about. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about connecting with your body. If you are experiencing brain fog, even if you follow all of these solutions, even if you um, are no longer in a unhealthy relationship, even if you are past whatever trauma or dynamic experience event that you have gone through, even if you are past that, you can still have that lingering brain fog. And you can rest all you want sometimes. Rest definitely helps. But sometimes it's just a matter of letting go and waiting. And that can be super frustrating. What I'm going to talk to you about today, because it's frustrating because we all like things now versus later, unless it's like a bill or something, we'll take that later. But as far as feeling your best and avoiding pain, this is what our brain does. Our brain goes towards rewards and it goes away, runs away from pain, right? And so it's very natural to want an immediate remedy relief to feel like yourself again. I completely understand that. So your brain, in order to cope with something that overloads the system, that's traumatic. So if you have an experience where it's just emotionally overwhelming, your brain goes into a shutdown and it also disassociates. So this is where we start getting into, like, I help my clients with parts therapy, or I go in and do a regression work, timeline therapy, where we take them back to a certain period and help them process it. Because anytime, and this doesn't have to result in a PTSD symptom, this can just be something that was really challenging and difficult for you to experience at that time. And if it becomes so overwhelming that you feel like you can't cope with it, with all of the emotions and the input coming in, your brain loves you and it wants to protect you. And so it starts shutting certain functions down. This is very similar to, like, if you are exercising and you are doing a long endurance exercising. Like for me, with my triathlons, if I was biking for 4 hours straight, which was normal for the type of training I was doing for the sports and events I was doing, when you're exercising that long, the blood flow starts pulling away from other organs and muscles and tissues that don't need it. And your body just naturally takes that blood flow, the endorphins, the hormones, and it feeds it to the muscles that need to keep going and are working. Your brain is doing the exact same thing. If you have that traumatic experience, you have something that overloads your body, there is a shutdown period within your brain. So in this case, it's kind of taking away the processing so that you don't have to experience these things, even though you are technically experiencing them. It's just you're no longer keyed into it. Your brain isn't keyed into it. It's protecting you. So you're not processing it. And then that can have sometimes a lingering effect. And it can even become chronic if you constantly put yourself in these same situations or you're no longer able to process it. So there's kind of three areas of your brain that are really affected in brain fog situations. Your amygdala. This is what controls your emotions. It's your survival instincts, your fight or flight. This is a mid part of your brain. So it's not about your right or your left hemisphere. So I know if you are somebody who knows a lot about your brain, your left side of your brain is very analytical. It's your what. Your right side of your brain is typically considered your creative side of your brain. It is your how. It's how you're feeling about this. But the middle part of your brain is where you're going to find your amygdala and your hippocampus, which is the other part of your brain. That is what I had talked about earlier. That's what helps you learn and store those memories and put them into buckets so that you can retrieve them and generalize, right? So these two parts of your brain are affected when you get into that overload and to cope, your gray matter can expand and it can contract. Your brain can expand and it contract. It does this all throughout your lifetime. And as you get older, naturally, you lose more and more gray matter, right? So your brain starts to go through this like, ooh, we're not feeling this, like this isn't okay. So it's going to shut it down to protect you. And that affects your prefrontal cortex, which is where that analytical part of your brain is trying to make decisions. So it is affecting your ability to observe and to really think through a situation. So you have this complete disconnection. That's really what I'm getting at. You have this complete disconnection because your prefrontal cortex is offline, and because your brain is going through this disassociation, it is actually removing you or numbing you from experiencing the emotions. So even though you may not have something like PTS, which I'm going to talk about for just a hot second, so the American Psychiatric Association, your APA of 1994, has come up with like 4 criteria for your PTSD. Sorry, you gotta add that disorder in there. So that's post-traumatic stress disorder, or anyway, one is the person has experienced, witnessed, or otherwise confronted with one or more events actually involved or threatened death, serious injury, or other threat to the physical integrity of the individuals or others, to yourself or to others. So, this is any time that there is a perceived threat to you, right? And this can be serious injury, but our brains also, just because of the where we are in society, can do this with social threats as well as physical threats. So I know that they are, the experts are saying specifically with your physical integrity, but just know that your emotions are part of your physical body. So the second thing is that individuals' response involve intense feelings. And when you have those intense feelings, that's where your memories can be very, very vivid and sharp. So you have this response that involves intense feelings. It can be horror, it can be fear, it can be helplessness, whatever it may be. So that is now stored in your memory with this intensity to it. And then the third criteria is that re-experiencing, the ruminating. You have dreams about it, you have nightmares about it. When you're awake, you're thinking about it, you're catastrophic. I hate that word, but you're catastrophizing it. And then the third thing is really that avoidance, that numbness factor. And so even if there's some type of like arousal to it, there's something that's bringing you back to it, there's this protection where you're numbing yourself because you're avoiding feeling these feelings. So that is what it takes in order to get your PTSD, like to meet the criteria for the APA definition of this diagnosis. Now, again, not a doctor, just an average person who helps people. So, anyway, please do your own research. Please look at this. Please consult with somebody who is an expert in this and can help you if you think you are experiencing these kind of symptoms. This is not what I help with. I'm not helping with this, but I want to pull that definition in because you can see that even when you're not having like PTSD, there is some overlap if you experience something for an event or a relationship with your coworker or whatever that can cause very, very similar processes where you feel that shutdown, you feel that dissociation. So that dissociation, again, I mentioned this is where you come up with parts therapy, but this is often what you see when we talk about inner childhood work. When you were a child and something, that you have categorized as bad, unwanted happens to you, you develop almost an alter personality to deal with this. And this is just a coping mechanism. This is a way of saying, like, it's not happening to me, though it is happening to me. This is just like a childlike way that your brain thinks, like, this is happening to you, but it's happening over here in the distance away from you. So that's kind of the best way to describe it. So these are kind of how your brain copes. But what I want to point out is that you can only experience the world, your life, your day-to-day moments through emotions. If you take out emotions, you're like a brain, you're like a computer or like AI. You can see, you can analogically comprehend, but you are no longer experiencing it. The emotions is what causes you to experience it, which is really interesting, right? Because your thoughts direct your emotions. So, but also just to point out, emotions is what connects us to ourselves. So when we go through this disassociation and we cut off these emotions, we are cutting our sense of self off. And we enter that place of numbness, which is kind of why I wanted to bring up the definition of the, or not the definition, but the criteria in order to get the PTSD diagnosis, right? It has that criteria of numbness in it. This is all what is wrapped up in brain fog. And again, you can have medical reasons for this. Okay, so there's all sorts of things that go on with your body, like the hormones, the cortisone, the epinephrine, all of that stuff. But what I really want to point out here is that once you hit this brain fog, then it is like it's like a line in the sand. Then there becomes like a process of feeling safe within your body to permit yourself to get all of those like emotions back. Because those emotions, even if you're numbing or you're doing activities to numb yourself, those emotions are still there. Your body technically experienced them. So they're still stored in your body. The disconnect is between your brain processing the emotions. And this is where a lot of the work comes in. This is one of the things I love about parts therapy. This is what I love about time regression, because you may have experienced something in the moment that you weren't ready to experience, or that was so strong that even though you were processing fractions of it, you couldn't process all of it at that specific moment. You know what? We are humans. We have emotions, all emotions. And sometimes, like if you think about Brene Brown and her shame research in her book Atlas of the Heart, she did that study with all of these different professionals out there in different areas. And they found that most people only have three emotions that they really can recognize, register, kind of deal with. And that is happiness. We all want happiness. Like that's, if I can tell you anything about the clients that come to me, they like, I want to be happy. Like, so there's happiness, there's sadness, and there's anger. So the majority of the collective in this world knows and can recognize those three emotions. But when you get hit with all sorts of emotions happening all at once in your body, and you can't acknowledge them, or you're not even like aware of, you know, like for instance, a lot of people may be experiencing shame, but they can't identify it as shame. And this is, I know I've spoken about this in the podcast in the past, but like for instance, my husband couldn't identify anxiety. And so the only emotion that kind of matched that he could was anger. So there's a point in our relationship where he was having a lot of anger, which he couldn't acknowledge or process. So it just got like transmuted into anger, and everything was coming out as anger. And so once he learned through, by the way, specialists, people who have degrees in, psychological stuff, he realized that, oh, this isn't anger. This is just anxiety. And I didn't know how to process it. And so I was funneling these emotions towards anger. This is how a lot of people operate. They're not aware of all of the emotions. And this is one of the reasons we can go into this shutdown process, and the timeline therapy can really help, because then you can go down that path in your memory when you're in a very relaxed state, and you can look at this again from a disassociated standpoint. So disassociation is that you're the observer, you're not the one who's experiencing it. This is what your brain naturally does to you when you're having a very intense, challenging moment. So what we're doing is we're doing it intentionally, on purpose, taking you back to that memory, allowing you to like reflect on it from a safe position. You know it's not happening to you. You know that you're older, wiser, and have better tools. You also have somebody like me who's there to talk and walk you through it. So anyway, this brain fog, I know you've had it, how long you've had it, how you're dealing with it, all of those things are up to you. And just from my own personal experience, I've had those points in time where I was experiencing a lot of overwhelm in my life. And so this is another area before we kind of sign off of this episode. Overwhelm, when your body is in overwhelm, because like let's say that you have like 15 things that you just have to get done and they all have the same priority level to you, right? And your body starts to go into shutdown. This is where you see a lot of people procrastinating. I'm going to give you, for instance, in my own life, like if you guys are dealing with the Google, I'm one of those people who got the email about Google restricting certain things and having to transfer like my hosting website, all these things. Like, I am not an IT person. And yes, I could totally hire somebody to go and do these things for me. But when I got this email, there was a certain shutting down process. And that's just one tiny itty bitty subject, that doesn't even have the weight to it that some emotional factors do, right? It was something that I was like, I know nothing about this. I don't feel like I can process this. I am going to put this on the back burner and come to it. So there's a procrastination period to allow my body to adjust and to deal with that, which is quite separate from people who are procrastinating in everything in their life and avoiding dealing with things on the whole, on the overall, right? That becomes a problem. But in this situation, the example I just gave you, the procrastination was a coping mechanism for me to come back refreshed and ready to look at it. So, we can start going down all sorts of rabbit holes here, and I don't want to do that. But I do want to point out how important it is to be connected to your emotions, to you. And if you happen to be one of those individuals out there, I know that because of I speak so openly about my husband and I's relationship and his transformation, as well as my transformation and how we've grown with our relationship from having someone who had narcissistic tendencies and to make this marriage work and to be healthy. I've talked a lot about this. And I know a lot of people come to me wanting help for this. Really, what they want is to stay as I have chosen to stay, but control themselves to match what their partner is expecting out of them, which is really, really highly just, I'm not going to advise it. I will not advise it. But I will help somebody. I'm not going to tell them what to do in their relationship, whether they want to stay or go. That is 100% their karma, their decision, their power. But what I will help people do is understand themselves, what's going on in their body, and then help them kind of let go of some things and to build up that self-love and self-worth. That's what I will help people do. So know the distinction. I'm not here to talk about your narcissistic partner and how they're treating you because you're making a choice to stay. And I will honor that choice. I will respect that choice, but I can't do anything about that relationship. I can only help the person who's right in front of me, who wants the help and is here to work with me. So if you are in a relationship and you have that type of constant volatile emotional relationship and you're choosing to stay on it, and the brain fog is going to continue because you're making the choice to continue having an environment that your brain thinks that you are in constant fight or flight, where your amygdala, the part of your brain that is responsible for controlling your emotions and the fight and fight, is sitting here thinking that you are in perceived danger. And so there's going to continue to be that brain fog until something changes in your environment or changes within you. And that is really up to you. That's your responsibility. So I am wishing you so much love and till next time.